Welcome back to another edition of the Saturday to Sunday Football Podcast. I am Paul Perticchese, and once again joined across the way by my man, Mr. Jeff Abercrombie. Jeff, week 2 of the college football season in the books. We're recording this right as the Monday Night Football game, Jets vs. Bills, is set to kick off shortly to conclude week 1 of the NFL season. Lot to talk about. How are you doing this evening?
I mean, there's nothing like the real thing, right? It's the normal life. It's things going crazy. I know you and I, separate coasts, trying to coordinate the schedules around dinner, bedtime, nap time, bath time, and I think we found a window to really talk about a real exciting first week. Setting the stage on the college side. There was the game of the week. I think everyone is going to be talking about, but in general, it was heavily favored teams playing, and it was tons of, high statistical performances, from stars across the league, but it was really hard to find, players who performed at, NFL elite levels against high difficulty competition as well. So, that sets the table for you to go ahead and announce the first string team of the week for week 2 of the college football season.
Yeah, I think you set the stage perfectly there. So let's get right into it. The S2S first string team of the week is starting out with quarterback Quinn Ewers out of Texas. The big upset by Texas over Alabama, 34-24 on the road. He was 24 of 38, 349 yards and 3 touchdowns. The first string running back of the week was Trey Benson out of Florida State. Florida State had a big win over Southern Mississippi, 66-13. Benson wasn't asked to do a lot, but he had 9 carries, 79 yards, 3 touchdowns, also chipped in for 1 catch for 21 yards, showing some versatility. At the wide receiver position, first string of the week, back to that Texas game, Adonai Mitchell, the former big-time Georgia recruit, now with Texas. He had 3 catches, 78 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And then staying in that game, first string tight end of the week, Jatavian Sanders out of Texas, 5 catches, 114 yards. Heavy Longhorns here in the first string team of the week. Jeff, any thoughts on the Ewers, Mitchell, Sanders, trio in helping them pull that big upset over Alabama this past weekend?
Yeah, I mean, this made it easy for me too, right? Again, finding high performers against high levels of competition this week was a little bit harder, but it wasn't that hard because all you had to do was look at Texas, Alabama headlining the slate of the weekend. And, what a win for Texas, first of all, right? So, I don't think this is the Alabama that we've, of the previous decade here. This is, but this is Texas is back, I think, is the thing that trends out on Twitter or X these days. And I think this really showed it. Maybe I'll kind of start bullet by bullet. Quinn Ewers, he looked the part of an NFL quarterback. I'd equate a lot of what he did this week, the way he looked and the way he played, similar to how I talked about Michael Penix Jr. last week. This was against Alabama on the big stage in Alabama. So I think that level of difficulty is something that, makes this performance a little bit more impressive. I'd say some of the same things came up. He looked lethal when he was clean in the pocket. He did get a little bit of pressure, but nothing that was really, anytime he was really threatened with a big hit, that's where you saw the mistakes come in. He kind of played like he has that Caleb Williams off-platform, sort of playmaker ability, different arm angles, not having his feet set well. And, that part of his game hasn't developed, as a really successful tool yet. Not saying that it can't, but he was so much better when he kept his feet underneath him, kept them set, climbed the pocket, use his athleticism while keeping a stable base and then delivering really accurate passes, which is the inaccuracy came with the off-platform throws, the sidearm angles, but the accuracy with a good platform when he was well protected is something that I think is a huge element of growth that we saw in his game this year as opposed to when he was starting some games last year. So I think that's first and foremost my biggest takeaway is that, we're seeing, some real NFL level, throws and accuracy. I think there's some consistency that we'd like to look for it. I think we'd like to look for it in the more difficult situations when you're under pressure. But this is, a great start. Do you have anything for Quinn Ewers before we get to the pass catchers?
Yeah, real quick. I did, listen, when we did the quarterback preview show, I said I already had him locked in as a guy who I thought was going to be a first round quarterback, but that was assuming some growth, some development. And now, like, listen, you're going to hear words like Toolsy and that with Quinn Ewers. That's a lock. And there are some people saying out there like Toolsy, like a Zach Wilson. But the thing that right off the bat, I think starts to separate those two caliber prospects. Now, this is not the second time. I know last year he got hurt in that Alabama game, but I think Texas wins that game last year too if Quinn Ewers doesn't get injured in that game. And he started out really impressive, cool, calm, and collected in that game. And now he does it for the whole game against Alabama. So there's now film against, listen, maybe Alabama's not as good as what we're accustomed to, but they're still one of the best teams in the country. They're still obviously one of the best coach teams in the country, and they have more five-star recruits than any other team in the country, maybe not named Georgia or right up there with them. So for Ewers to do this performance on the road, I think speaks volumes of it, that it's why, unless like he really falters or shows something, I just think that the traits and the tools that he possesses and now having this caliber game on his resume, I think speaks volumes on it's going to be hard for me to not look at this guy and think the NFL is going to think he's a first round pick and maybe potentially a high first round pick, top 10, top 15. I really came away impressed with Quinn Ewers. That first game, he had those glimpses of high level plays and then some questionable plays. He cleaned that up a little bit. We saw more high level plays than questionable plays in this one. Still room to grow, but this was a big step in becoming that guy that I think something could be a top 10 or top 15 pick in the 2024 NFL draft.
Exactly. And, again, you alluded to last year, he did have a great startup against Alabama. And some of the questions we saw in his game came in some of the games he played after that Alabama game. Maybe he was hurt, but again, like some of that inconsistency, it's going to have to go throughout the season, not just game to game. And then, his success is Adonai Mitchell's, is Jatavian Sanders' success. I mean, Xavier Worthy had a great game as well. But with 2 touchdowns, I think Adonai Mitchell gets the nod. Quick things that jumped out to me was just the playmaking ability, his ability to high point the ball, just be a weapon down the field. But I don't know if you had any more detailed or nuanced takeaways from that game.
Yeah, I mean, Adonai Mitchell, he was a guy when I talked about him in the wide receiver show, I think he was in my like 15-ish range, but I talked about him as a guy that had upward mobility is probably as great as any running wide receiver in my rankings, because we're talking about a former big time recruit. Pro Football Focus, I respect the guys over there. They had him in their top 5, so they saw something about this kid as an intriguing prospect. And I think for me it's the ball skills and the body control. And you talked about it, and we saw it on some of those big plays that he made this past weekend. If he continues to string this together, this is a guy who can go from what I know is more of like a day 2 type guy, or maybe a round 3, early round 4 guy, and catapult himself maybe into a top 50 pick because he possesses that talent. And then Jatavian Sanders, listen, Brock Bowers is going to be tight end 1 in this class. I think that's pretty much locked in. But Jatavian Sanders is probably going to be locked in as tight end 2. And I think he could be on that border late 1, early 2. He's an explosive playmaking tight end, really good athleticism, good ball skills, could be a productive receiver at the next level and a mismatch X factor. We just saw 4 tight ends go in the top 50. I think Jatavian Sanders' ceiling could be higher of a Michael Mayer when you're talking about his pass catching ability. It could be higher than a Sam Laporta. It could be higher than a Luke Musgrave. And if not higher than those guys, he's definitely in the neighborhood of those guys. So I think you're talking about a guy who could be in that top 50 mix for sure.
Yeah, one of my favorite, tight ends growing up, a 49ers fan, never seen him really break out with us, but then, having a heyday in Tennessee for a little bit was Delanie Walker. You see a little bit of Delanie Walker and Jatavian Sanders on the field this last weekend. I think it's safe to say Brock Bowers is going first overall. We're talking about, a prospect on the level of a Kyle Pitts level height. Kyle Pitts went in the top 5. I don't think it's that crazy to entertain a notion that in 10 months, 9 months, wherever it is that for the NFL draft now, that we don't see those two names called too far apart from one another. Like, I don't know if Brock Bowers is going to be taken in the top 5. He might be a top 20 pick. I don't know that Jatavian Sanders would necessarily fall too far out of the top 20 with the athletic playmaker that he is. We go into, the tight ends is the one that I find the hardest to evaluate because we come in and we have these certainties that Michael Mayer is the highlight name of this class. And I think he was the 4th tight end taken in the draft last year, 3rd, 4th. There was a lot of excitement for other players. And so we always walk into this like locked and loaded with this one idea. And the landscape for tight ends really shifts. And even if it doesn't shift for, the college football season and lead up into the NFL draft, we're seeing it with Kyle Pitts right now. The landscape certainly shifts in the NFL as well. And so that's going to be, just a fascinating storyline to come to when it comes down to when rookie drafts happen, 10 months from now.
Yeah, for sure. Sanders, I think you're right. And I think in the fantasy landscape, they're going to be real close potentially in draft equity when you're talking like those rookie drafts. And then Trey Benson, listen, we said there wasn't a lot of high end performances against high level opponents, especially at the running back position. I feel like it's been a very slow start to the year for the top talent in running backs. We talked about Trey Benson a little bit last week, not really getting going too much, but showing some glimpses. Listen, he only had 10 touches this week, but over 100 yards, 3 touchdowns. That contact balance, the ability to break tackles, the quick feet for a man his size. I thought we saw that a little bit this week. So I just wanted to kind of give the nod to him without any high level running back statistical performances this week that really stood out. Benson is obviously, a favorite of mine and Jeff's as well. Let me take this right to the S2S second string team of the week. At the quarterback position was Tyler Van Dyke out of Miami. Big win by the Hurricanes, 48-33 over Texas A&M. He threw for 374 yards and 5 touchdowns, showing glimpses of what last year made some people think that he was potentially a round 1 quarterback prospect. At the running back position, it was Devin Neal out of Kansas. Kansas beat Illinois this past week, 34-23. Devin Neal really off to a strong start the first couple weeks of the season. He had 10 carries for 120 yards and a touchdown this past week, 4 catches for 47 yards. The 5'11", 215-pound back off to a really impressive performance. Troy Franklin of Oregon at the wide receiver position for second string team of the week. They beat Texas Tech this past week. He went for 6, 103 and a touchdown. Explosive playmaker. And then Michael Trigg out of Ole Miss, definitely a Devy darling. Ole Miss got the W this week. He only had 1 catch for 21 yards and a touchdown. Week 1, he had 3 catches for 44 yards. A lot of people thought that Caden Priestcorn was going to be the lead guy this year, but right now he's been out with an injury, and Michael Trigg has stepped up and made some plays over the first couple weeks there for Ole Miss. From the second string team of the week, Jeff, for me, what really stands out is Tyler Van Dyke, because this is a guy last year as a redshirt sophomore. There was a lot of talk that this was a guy that was in early 2023 mock drafts. And then, the season really kind of spiraled last year and he showed a lot of inconsistencies, but we're talking about like the prototype from a size, height, weight, frame, stature, great arm talent. So this was a big time performance, I think, to kind of put himself back in the mix and on the radar a little bit, because he's not a guy who's going to do a lot with his legs, but he can move around a little bit. But the arm talent and the size and the frame, this was what showed glimpses of why he was so highly regarded last year. That was the one that kind of stood out the most. We know Troy Franklin is an explosive playmaker. Wide receiver position is always a lot of guys who put up good statistical performances, but Texas Tech, that game was that was a close spread. Oregon was only favored to win by 4. I think they ended up winning by 8, and Franklin made some big plays showing his explosiveness, vertical slot capabilities, dangerous weapon after the catch or in any type of manufactured touch. I still need to see Troy Franklin add some weight to that 6'3" frame. Every time I watch him, I think to myself, like, this guy's got to, drink some protein shakes and whatever, but he's got to gain like 10, 15 pounds and get to that like 190, 195, but he's got explosiveness for days. So Jeff, any thoughts on the second string team guys there? Either elaborate on Franklin or anything else you want to mention?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we're going to highlight some of these players, we're going to see their NFL traits, and I think Troy Franklin, the speed is really what jumps out. When he's playing, it just looks at a different level than anybody else on the field. That shows up in his performances last weekend. It's something that I think we'll expect to see week in, week out. Tyler Van Dyke, I don't really know that right now there's that much more to say because we covered him, really well last year. And I think we saw a performance like this. We said, these traits, the traits that he are going to have NFL evaluators taking a shot on him, really can come together into a performance like this. And then it is just about him having the ability to, we talked about it with Quinn Ewers, be consistent, right? And, sometimes it just takes a little bit of time and a little bit of reps and a few games until it clicks. And I don't know if it's a matter of when or if, but, if it were to hit and just click for Tyler Van Dyke, whether that's this year or even next year, we see something where you can, skyrocket your, draft stock in the realm of like a Michael Penix, right? We talked about him last week where everything just seems like it's clicking for him, right? If we see it click for Tyler Van Dyke, I think the ceiling is round one.
Yeah, I think that's what we're talking about. There's a reason why he was projected last year in early mock drafts. That's not coming from thin air. That's coming from NFL scouts. That's coming from, high level evaluators and executives that looked at him as a potential round one guy because of those traits. So if he starts to put it together, we could see him push his way back up there. Before we take it to the Devy team of the week, honorable mention again to Shadu Sanders. He could have easily been either on our first string or second string team of the week. What he continues to do there with Colorado this past week, almost 400 yards, 2 more touchdowns, easy win for Colorado over Nebraska. They were only favored by a couple points and they blew out Nebraska. He just continues arrow pointing up. He's going to show up on these S2S teams of the week. But as we said from last week when we set the stage, we're going to try to bring new names sometimes. And only if like the performance is just so out of this world, we'll put somebody on back-to-back weeks. But we kind of want to talk about, new names each week. And only if we really feel like we need to bring up the same name again. But Shadu Sanders had to at least be mentioned for the performance he put on again this past week. If we take this to the S2S Devy team of the week for week 2, quarterback Connor Wegman out of Texas A&M. He was 31 of 53, 336 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, his first 2 turnovers of the year. They lost 48-33 to Miami. He did throw 5 touchdowns in week 1. So we're talking about off to a hot start. Wanted to bring him up because there wasn't last week we talked about Drew Lar here. Connor Wegman is one of the top 5-star recruits, one of the top underclassmen quarterbacks in the country. We got Cabe Klunick out of Clemson. We got Drew Lar. Wegman is right there with those 2 other guys is probably the top 2 Devy underclassmen quarterbacks or non-draft eligible, I should say. At the running back position, it was Omarion Hampton out of UNC. UNC beat App State 40-34. He had 234 yards and 3 touchdowns. 4-star recruit, 6 feet, 220 pounds. Wide receiver was Evan Stewart out of Texas A&M. 11 catches, 142 yards for the all-star performer there out of Texas A&M in Evan Stewart. And at the tight end position, listen, it's hard to find non-draft eligible underclassmen tight ends that are significant in terms of Devy, but Deuce Robinson now back-to-back weeks, so he did kind of break our mold here. He helped USC comfortably beat Stanford, 4 catches, 71 yards. That's 3 consecutive weeks now for the freshman tight end, who is the number 1 tight end recruit coming out of the country. Every week he's made a significant play or more than one for USC. So this is, we're talking about Brock Bowers, right? We're talking about Ja'Tavion Sanders. Deuce Robinson is on the trajectory to be one of those guys that we're talking about in very high regards, similar to, Ja'Tavion Sanders, similar to Bryson Nesbitt. I'm not going to put the Brock Bowers or anything like that just yet. But I think Deuce Robinson's on that trajectory to be one of those guys that we're talking about a lot when he becomes draft eligible, based on the pedigree, based on, the high school star recruit, the athleticism and early production here. Been very impressed with Deuce Robinson. Jeff, any quick thoughts on the Devy guys, the quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end?
To spotlight one name on this list, Omarion Hampton. He's a guy that, really jumped out when I was watching through film last year, especially when, we're, looking up Drake May, we're looking up, um, UNC and
Josh Downs last year.
Yeah, Josh Downs. Um, I think there was like some other running back mates there too that look good, but Omari and Hampton. I think it was just he was on my Devy watch list last year. He had a really good season last year. I think this is just his trajectory pointing up in drastic fashion. That he's going to very quickly be a name that climbs the Devy ranks.
Yeah, I think he's going to be a guy. We're going to see UNC in a lot of shootouts again this year, a lot of high-scoring games, and Hampton's going to have an opportunity this year to put up monster statistical numbers. And then right now, Drake May's obviously the one who garners a lot of attention, but if May declares like we all expect him to, their offense could morph a little bit, and it could be Hampton being the guy who's kind of leading that offense next year in the ground game, less so than all the attention Drake May's getting. So, he's the guy to keep a close eye on for sure. Let's spin this to the NFL side of things, right? When we do these recap shows, we do it for week 2 of the college football season, but we take a look at week 1 of the NFL season. And then next week 3 of the college, week 2 of the NFL. We're going to put an S2S team in a week for the rookies in terms of week 1. And at the quarterback position was Anthony Richardson. I think he played way above even my expectations of an Anthony Richard, supporter. 223 yards, 24 of 37, and a touchdown. Throwing the ball, another 10 rushes and 40 yards, and a rushing touchdown there. The Colts were going up against a good team, Jacksonville. So an impressive performance by Anthony Richardson, even in the loss. At the running back position, not a lot of the rookie running backs really, hit the ground running, but Bijan Robinson, 16 total touches, about 83 yards and a touchdown. Lost a lot of work to Tyler Algier, but still, helped Atlanta get the victory and the reception, the ability to make people miss in the open field. That was a special play showing Bijan's special skills. At the wide receiver position, Puka Nacua, 10 catches, 119 yards. Really impressive performance, I think, by the 5th-round rookie or even 6th-round rookie. Right out of the gate, I know no Cooper Kupp, a really impressive performance by Nacua. And then Luke Musgrave out of Green Bay, 3 catches, 50 yards. Jeff, I have a couple honorable mentions, but let's start there. Anywhere you want to go with Richardson, Bijan, Puka, or Musgrave?
Yeah, I don't think we're going to have to force a rookie quarterback on this list every week because we're going to be cycling through the same names. But I think it's very worthwhile to highlight when, one of them actually, exceeds expectations. And I think going up, against Jacksonville, I don't think people gave Andy a good shot. I think Anthony Richardson gave him a great shot. He is still making rookie mistakes. You see that on the interception. But he's also making plays. He's a playmaking quarterback. He's taking that to the NFL. It's translating on the NFL field. This is the type of thing we like to see because, they'll clean up the rookie mistakes with experience, but you don't just like develop playmaking ability out of nowhere. And when you see that those traits that happened on Saturday on the college football field start showing up on Sunday, that's what this podcast is about, right? I'm a big Michael Pittman fan, so it was great to see that Richardson is going to have the ability to be able to support, players like Michael Pittman, support the fantasy assets there in Indianapolis. So, that's really one highlight. We've been excited about him, but really, this isn't like a looks lost Justin Fields, Trey Lance kind of situation. This is a, some rookie mistakes, but kept some poise there in, a NFL debut. I think that was, noteworthy and worthy of inclusion on our list here.
Jeff, before you jump to a different rookie, I think what we saw in week 1 was what we talked about night 1 of the NFL draft, a perfect marriage between Anthony Richardson, the prospect, and Shane Steichen, the new head coach of the Indianapolis Colts, coming from Philadelphia, the system he created in that first year with Jalen Hurts to give him the ability to be successful and not put too much on his plate. They got out the ball quickly yesterday. He didn't ask Richardson to do a lot of work through progressions. He catered a system to his strengths right now and giving Richardson the ability to be successful and then also not put too much on his plate as he's still obviously a young player who needs time to develop to be a complete player. I think there's always disconnect. It sounds like it should be so obvious, right? But we saw Justin Fields in his first year. We see other quarterbacks and coaches don't seem to be in sync sometimes in what they ask them to do. I think the marriage between Richardson and Steichen is going to lead to him even being more successful statistically in year one than I maybe even thought as a big supporter. And then I think obviously the sky the limit moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point. And I think that's something that we are going to have to start evaluating too when it comes into how do you play dynasty and fantasy. The prospects of, what makes a successful quarterback grow into a successful quarterback at the NFL level. I still, Trey Lance, I think, is the one that we'll talk. We talked our ear off on Trey Lance, but
we can do a 5-hour podcast.
Well, talking with my friends, right? It's a big conversation, right? That's like, the buzz of the end of, the last week of the preseason and everything. And, like when you actually dissect, his opportunity, he never really got an opportunity. He had one opportunity. It got ruined by the injury, and, someone else took the job, and then that was your window. That's tragic. Maybe he wasn't good enough. That's totally fair. I'm not watching every practice, but so to be able to take advantage of that opportunity when you get it, it's credit to Anthony Richardson. I'm gonna go straight to an honorable mention because I mentioned him last week. I said he'll stock will never be lower. Zay Flowers. I don't have a stat line in front of me. I think he was just 50%.
He was like 8 for 78. I'll check it up right there. But
maybe a touchdown. He had 10 targets. I think he was half of the entire Baltimore offense, basically. Everybody else chipped in
9 for 78. No touchdown, but 9 for 78.
Everybody else chipped in, here and there. But, I think he had 10 targets was just this. I don't remember how many passes Lamar threw, but, his target share was well over 30%, 40%. He was the go-to guy in that offense. And, Rashad Bateman, I was curious to see how week one would play out. He was a part-time player. Rashad Bateman played about a third of snaps. Zay Flowers was out there every down earning targets. I think he is just going to sprint away, with the headline pass catching receiver out of this core, with Mark Andrews there being at the tight end position.
Yeah, listen, Zay Flowers, if it wasn't for Puka Nacua putting that performance in a victory on I think it was on the road against Seattle, without Cooper Kupp, Zay Flowers was my guy. Jordan Addison was my other honorable mention. Really strong performance from him. I think this wide receiver class is going to be fun. We might not have a lot of names to rotate through the quarterback position for the rookie team in a week, but I think we're going to have a lot of names to kind of rattle through at the wide receiver position. And then bring up some new names here or there just in terms of significance. It's not just going to be statistical for teams of the week because would probably be Bijan most weeks at the running back position. But yeah, impressive performance by Zay, by Addison. It was great to see the tight end so early involved, like Musgrave, every snap player almost. Sam Laporta, pretty much every snap player. These guys are getting thrown right into the fire. We'll see, Dalton Kincaid's usage. I'm sure we'll circle back to him next week or in the coming weeks when the Bills aren't playing on Monday Night Football, and Puka Nacua. Listen, there's some people who were really big fans of his all preseason and we're hyping him up. And I was, I got him in a couple spots, but I was just like, maybe we're going a little bit overboard, first week, rookie, mid-day 3, not even early day 3, but really impressive performance from him right out of the gate. To kind of steal the spotlight from Zay Flowers, who didn't make the team for week 1, but Puka Nacua goes out there, 10 catches over 100 yards. So I thought that was pretty impressive there.
Pretending he's Cooper Kupp, basically. But, to draw one more parallel there, people were not on Cooper Kupp as a draft prospect and as a player, right? I think they was slow and, I think he had the 3-cone drill, but, he didn't have this insane athleticism or this typical draft profile, right? I can't even remember where Cooper Kupp was drafted. it strikes me that he was a day 2 pick, but he might have even been like top of round 4. Just saying, like, I think Cooper Kupp is a superstar and he'll be back and he'll be doing his thing. But for right now, Puka Nacua is giving a glimpse into what the post Cooper Kupp life looks like.
Yeah, that's for sure. And let's close out the night with a little bit of a dynasty stock report. And I thought that maybe the way we would maybe handle dynasty stock report this year is just like the big headlines that we think maybe lead to some movement in terms of dynasty, whether it's up, down, or something like that. So the things that stood out for me, and then Jeff, you can kind of run with any one of these to kind of get us started. J.K. Dobbins tears his Achilles. Feel awful for the young man. Was going to have every opportunity in his, final season there on his contract in Baltimore to put together a really strong year. Now his season is done. Another major injury to a guy that already had injury concerns. You hope this is not the end of the road for J.K. Dobbins to ever be in fantasy relevant again. DeAndre Swift down, Kenneth Gainwell up. What we saw in the Philadelphia backfield this past, week was stunning. Rashad Penny, inactive. DeAndre Swift gets 1 carry and Kenneth Gainwell, the workhorse. Panic mode for Drake London and Kyle Pitts. Are we there yet? Cam Akers, stock down. Is he losing the job or the lead job to Kyron Williams in that Rams offense? And then I think we have to acknowledge that Tua just continues to impress. He was on his way for maybe an MVP season last year if he didn't go down with the concussion. And right out of the gate, I don't even know what his final. I didn't even write down his final stat line. Did he hit 500 yards or really close to it? But like for something. Tua's stock up. We always see the top of the quarterback ranks, those guys that are mobile and add the component in the run game. Tua doesn't offer that. But with these duo of wide receivers, that might be the one exception to what we're used to now in terms of the quarterback position. I don't know if he even needs to do much with his legs when he's playing with Tyreek Hill, who seems unguardable, and Jalen Waddle and his big playability. So I think it's got to be stock up on Tua. If he could stay healthy, I think he's going to put up some staggering statistics.
Well, I mean, I got to the bar for the afternoon games, and that Miami LA Chargers one was about as fun as it gets. And I think you pretty much, had the exact ending you'd expect for a Chargers game. You had Tua Herbert, going back to back in the draft. I think you mentioned it. He's not going to, bring a lot on his legs, but we already have, players like Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow, considered up there in an elite tier of quarterback. And that's the, that's where Tua can cement himself with good play this year, contract extension, long-term commitment, from the franchise. Look, I have been as big of a J.K. Dobbins fan as I think there is out there. And every single time we've seen him on the field playing, he's been great. He was the running back room out there. I think he was dominating touches until he went down. It didn't even look like, your typical Achilles injury. Was in denial until it was pretty official today. But, just holding out hope that maybe it was something not as bad as it was. But I don't really see the path, for J.K. Dobbins' NFL future. And it like pains me to say because of the talent that he is. But we have seen these Achilles injuries, rob players of their careers. Dobbins was already on a precipice with his previous injury track record as well. He doesn't have a contract next year with Baltimore. He was, fighting for that, and for good reason. You see why. If Baltimore paid him, you'd think he'd be able to work himself back into the rotation next year. But now what is his future now? And
yeah, it's probably a league minimum deal next year as a fourth string running back to start on the depth chart.
And he's going to have to go the Deontay Foreman route to get back into it. And hopefully, I would love to see J.K. Dobbins back on an NFL field. He will be someone I'm rooting for, but I'm going to be rooting from the sidelines with him on somebody else's roster at this point, and which pains me to say. Speaking of Achilles injuries, Cam Akers, right? He had that stretch to last season. And one of the biggest things I was watching this week was his utilization, right? Because you had the buzz in the offseason saying that Cam Akers is going to be the guy, right? He is going to be the workhorse. He's going to get the touches. They need him to be successful, for their offense to be successful. And we saw him start the game. But if you remember last year, Kyren Williams gets hurt on the kickoff. And it comes out after the game that the team was expecting Kyren Williams to be a big part of their plans. And his injury really, derailed, what they thought of his, involvement with the team. And so keeping that in the back of my mind, I was just wondering how much does Kyren Williams get in this backfield? Is it a split? Is it a 60-30, 60-30? Is it a 50-50? It looks like Kyren Williams is potentially still the coach's favorite, right? Cam Akers started the game, but Kyren Williams was in there on goal line situations. Kyren Williams was there on pass catching situations. I honestly think, and here's what I'm toying with, is that Kyren Williams is, in a vacuum, the guy you want to own in that backfield, even in a redraft setting. Like, would I drop Cam Akers for Kyren Williams? Because it certainly seemed like the Rams would rather have given Kyren Williams the ball much of the time.
Jeff, I know Cam Akers got 22 carries, but they were in clock killing mode most of that second half. The stat that I think speaks volumes of what you're talking about. I'm going to put you on the spot. There was 30 running back snaps in the first half. You want to take a guess what the ratio for Kyren Williams to Cam Akers is?
I'm going to guess 60-30 the other direction, right? 60-30 Kyren would be kind of what I'd guess.
It was worse. 26-4. 26 plays Kyren Williams was on the field to 4 for Cam Akers the whole first half. Second half, Akers played a lot more, ended up with 20-something carries. The Rams were comfortably ahead. I think we know if it's a straight running situation, yeah, they're probably going to use Cam Akers. I think he's more of a natural runner. But I think that first half usage speaks volumes of what they think or what they want to be from their running back. In a close game, I think they might like the versatility of Kyren Williams more than Cam Akers. We've seen this team be down on Cam Akers in the past. Is it one of those situations again, or did I just like Kyren Williams? But 26-4 is a staggering ratio to start your season. So
and the takeaway, Cam Akers is not a 70-80%, share of the backfield player that people thought they might get when they were drafting, right? They thought like a Joe Mixon kind of thing, right? Like he's going to get all of the work, a Nick Chubb type thing. They're going to get all the work. Sure, there's a backup. It's going to spell him sometimes. That is not the case. I don't know. We've seen LA be comfortable with that type of situation before. And if that comes to be, it's going to be Kyren Williams. It's not going to be Cam Akers. I think that ship has sailed for Cam Akers.
Yeah, I think he's going to be another guy that's going to be on a new team next year. And what is he looked at and what kind of contract? I don't think Cam Akers is getting the David Montgomery contract of like 3 years, $18 million. I think he's going to be settling for a 1-year deal, maybe for like $4 million or like a
Rashad Penny kind of thing.
Yeah, that's where I think we're headed here. And like I said, J.K. Dobbins will be talking about a guy who's probably signing for the league minimum. And who knows, it might be like late in training camp next year, right? Like who knows how long the Achilles is going to take for him to come back with all the other injuries he's had in the past. So, really unfortunate for all of those guys. Also in that draft class was DeAndre Swift. So maybe that's the natural thing there to go next. They made the trade. It sounded like he was going to be heavily involved. We didn't know to what level because they had, 3 guys there, but it was the Ken Gainwell show. I don't see a scenario where we look at it right now and say we'd rather have DeAndre Swift than Ken Gainwell. I think if that's the case, we're holding on to what we thought of DeAndre Swift years ago. He's now in his 4th NFL season. The Lions didn't want him. They made that blatantly clear, giving him away for like a 4th round pick in a couple years.
He isn't what we've built him up to be.
Exactly.
He isn't. It's the same thing with Cam Akers at this point is we have to adjust. And I think all three of those players, like if you can get anybody who believes they're still in the top 30 of the dynasty running back landscape, anything, it's probably smart to get out because you're right. I think you'd rather Kenny Gainwell now. I think you'd rather Kyron Williams now. J.K. Dobbins is just a sad story of, injury taking away his career. But you're probably just, if we were to take this into a dynasty rankings, all of the backup running backs at this point, would be ahead of those players, or the quote unquote backups. The only thing that was shocking for me for Philly was that Kenneth Gainwell had that large of a share of the work. I thought we'd see much more of a rotation. But I think Gainwell's stock way up because Philly's usually had a diverse set of roles and they've kind of had specialists fill those roles. And Kenneth Gainwell, don't forget how he closed out last year in the playoffs as being the go-to trusted guy for Philly as well. So he's essentially eating everybody else's lunch, accumulating all of the roles that the coaches trust him to do. And that is, we just don't normally see that from the Philly backfield. And so if he takes over the trusted player for more roles as the season goes on, that is, the lead back in one of the league's top offenses. And I think his stock is skyrocketing.
Yeah. And, I never remember after 1 week of an NFL season, I feel like I have to do some drastic dynasty overall ranking updates. So that's my goal, to see because I think they're significant. J.K. Dobbins has got to go to 60 or 70 if we're being brutally honest. And I was right there with you, a big J.K. Dobbins guy. But for him not to be somewhere in the 60 or 70 range is just being naive based on his injury history. He doesn't have a home for next year in terms of he doesn't have a contract. Maybe they let him rehab, and they give him, the league minimum or whatever. But he's not even. It's a really weird spot to be in, to be a free agent and then coming back from this kind of injury. So it's going to be interesting. Final thing, Jeff, any thoughts on the Atlanta guys? Is it time to hit the panic mode, or the run game was working and we're just going to have to ride this out until they get into some different type of games environments?
I'm going to be patient. I'm not going to have high expectations for this year. I'm going to buy talent where it's there. I don't think Desmond Ridder is necessarily going to be a high volume quarterback. That doesn't change my opinion of Drake London or Kyle Pitts as players. But it does give us maybe something to think about breakout years.
Yeah, I think, listen, I think we all got to take a couple steps back on the Kyle Pitts, and I think we put him up really high, and he just might not be the guy we thought. And I'm not sure Atlanta even views him that way, the way they kind of use him. But I'm still willing to take a wait and see approach. I don't think Ritter's going to be the quarterback next year, so we'll see how that plays out. And next week, we're going to be talking about the New York Jets, I think, a little bit, because I don't know if you had eyes on your phone or the TV, Jeff. Aaron Rodgers' first drive of the game goes down with appears to be a serious injury.
Oof.
Went to the medical tent. The cart had to come get him out of the medical tent. The early Twitter reports.
So
I saw
see.
ankle.
Hopefully.
I saw foot. I mean, who knows what's going on there? But that's going to have real big ramifications for this year and potentially.
We've seen what Zach Wilson brings to the table. We'll see if any tutelage from Aaron Rodgers changes that. At all. Hey, at least if we're talking about the Jets and not the Giants, right? I mean, I don't think there was anything to talk about. I mean, there was one team that played on Monday night last night. Not to really dig it in there for you. But
I've never, I can't remember in my adult life me ever not watching a Giants game start to finish without a major family event or something like that going on. But last night I threw in the towel. I had to be up at 5 a.m. I threw in the towel in the third quarter because it was an embarrassment. But we won't go there.
Should have thrown in the towel for Daniel Jones sooner too. Get him out of the game. That game was lost.
That was one of the
from the first quarter.
Yeah, that was one of the worst games of Dable. No reason for Daniel Jones to be taking those hits late into the game.
It's okay, man. I think I expected San Francisco to come out flat this last week as well, because that has been their thing. That doesn't define a season, right?
Yep. So we'll see.
There's a lot of teams come out flat. It doesn't define a season. How do they do the next 2-3 games? Let's see how they rebound.
Absolutely. So, guys, hope you're enjoying these in-season recap shows. We're keeping it tight, trying to get through, a good amount of players, but also not overwhelming and not just regurgitating the same names from week to week. If you're liking the content that we're supporting and providing, please support us. Go over to our website, SS Football. Check out the premium content tab, and for $9.99, all the new notebooks are out. 2024 notebooks are out. Get access to our scouting notebook. It has like 90 detailed player profiles, our rankings notebook, all our different rankings, and then in April, the draft projections notebook. If you can't purchase that, at least rate, review, subscribe wherever you listen to the podcast. Get over to YouTube, subscribe there as we're trying to build that up there as well. So another college football week in the books. NFL week 1 concluding tonight. On behalf of Jeff, on behalf of our sound tech engineer, David Nicano, and myself, thank you for joining us, and we look forward next time taking you from Saturday to Sunday.